Praise be Jesus Christ, and onward with Mary. Good and holy evening, my dear children, and welcome back to our Tuesday evening catechesis cycle. This cycle is from my book, which is now available, and I will pass on, if you wish, during my tour in September, but is also already available here at the Center of Marian Spirituality of Little Nazareth, Mary and the Antichrist. It's a theological reading of the final confrontation. This is the 14th installment of our catechetical cycle. As you know, the title this evening is quite interesting, as perhaps the others are, I hope. The title is Benedict XVI and the Antichrist, an open matter. Well, the title perhaps already gives an idea of what is intended to be the path of the reflection this evening, and that is Benedict XVI in the book Last Conversations with the journalist and writer Peter Seewald wanted to emphasize that he should not and cannot exclude that he is the Pope who fulfills. He did not say it clearly, however. It is clear from his lines that he does not exclude that he could be the Pope who fulfills, let's say, the third secret of Fatima. And so we have to see in what sense Benedict XVI has an open matter with the theme of the Antichrist. In order to do that, I will go through four. That is, I will examine 4 moments or issues, 4 moments of my reflection, of my catechesis, and then, of course, we will develop them. They are as follows. First moment, the awareness. That is, Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger, certainly as we will now see, before he became Pope, he was clear about what we would experience. This is very important to know. Joseph Ratzinger, of course, I will give you evidence, was clear about what we are going to experience. So the first moment is awareness. We will see how about the Antichrist and the time we are living in. The second of the 4 moments is the confirmation. The confirmation, that is, after a progressive awareness, becoming aware that we are evidently in the final confrontation between the woman clothed with the sun and the red dragon, Benedict XVI has a confirmation, as we shall now see, that yes, he was right in having glimpsed that this is the time of the final confrontation. The third moment is entitled The Implementation of the Design. It is let's say, the rather operational phase of this absolutely extraordinary Pope, as few have been in the history of the Church. I hear all the time from people who contact me that Benedict XVI visits them in dreams. There are people who dream about him, and they are dreams, not so far-fetched, maybe prophetic, that deliver profound messages. I mean, there's no doubt that Benedict XVI has implemented a program. He has implemented a program that I would call not simply one of the evangelical shrewdness, that Jesus in the Gospel says, be simple as doves, but shrewd as serpents. One cannot be pleasing the Lord if one is not simple. However, at the same time, one must not be stupid. One must not be, I would say, shallow. Simplicity, the Gospel says, also needs a strong character of shrewdness. And so, with this binary of evangelical simplicity, because we can all credit it to Benedict XVI, who was a simple man, evangelically simple, and of shrewdness, Benedict XVI has implemented a program and a plan. Finally, the 4th moment of this, let's say, of this open account between Benedict XVI and the Antichrist is entitled the epilogue. The epilogue. I say right away that there is a reference here to the great prelate, as we shall now see. So I repeat the 4 moments. Awareness, confirmation of what he suspected, Thirdly, the implementation of the design of the program, call it whatever you'd like, and finally the epilogue. Well, having said that, let's go straight to the examination of these 4 moments that are meant to try to express an open account between Benedict XVI, the Pope who fulfills the prophecies, especially the third secret of Fatima, and of the Antichrist. The first point, as I told you, is awareness. Joseph Ratzinger has had a very rewarding life from a theological point of view. Completely rewarding. He entered the seminary, where his brother, as you may recall already, Georg Ratzinger, was already there. And he turned out from the beginning to be a young man with intellectual gifts, so to speak, that were completely out of the ordinary. But Freemasonry was not in charge of the Catholic Church back then. Not yet. Today, young people, this perhaps I never say enough, today young men who enter the seminary who are brilliant Catholics, especially masculine males, are marginalized if they make it to become priests because they resist. They are sent to mountains and suburban parishes. Homosexuals are fast-tracked. Do you understand my words? They go forward. Those whom Freemasonry identifies as characters who can help the project to destroy Roman Catholicism. There's no doubt that in the diocesan chancelleries, the choices in the Church, even in the Vatican, are entrusted to questionable people, and not simply on a doctrinal level, but even on a moral level. There's a very powerful gay lobby. But then we are talking about the first half of the last century here, of course. There was still the so-called, it's a decisive word, even for us Italians in politics, and not only, that of meritocracy. That is, you are worth if you have qualities. Let's say I have a company, I have a business. It's convenient for me to place you in a prominent position because, anyway, you make my work pay off. Here, Joseph Ratzinger was still in a church context in which there was what we can call a meritocracy. He was advantaged if compared to the curator of Ars, to whom, however, incredibly, as I said in the past few days, Benedict XVI was always very devoted. That one didn't succeed well in his studies, etc. Instead, it's Joseph Ratzinger, so brilliant that the superiors identify him, that's the way it used to be done before, for the good of the Church. They understand that he has a charisma to put into action, to put into practice, and so they make him study. And he studies. I'm still talking about the first point, the awareness, and by studying, Joseph Ratzinger becomes a theologian right away, a priest. And very soon he gets quite early the chair of theology, if I remember correctly, in Bonn, Germany. And especially when the work of the Second Vatican Council opens, Joseph Ratzinger participates as an expert, very young expert, accompanies the Cardinal of Cologne, who chooses him as an expert at the Second Vatican Council.
Al Concilio Vaticano II. Perito non nel senso che muore, ma perito nel senso di esperto. Ecco.
Then Joseph Ratzinger participates in the Second Vatican Council as a theologian, mind you, as a pro-modernist. Now, I don't feel like saying as a modernist theologian. I don't feel like saying that. That's his problem. It's not like I can solve his problems. But let's say, as a pro-modernist, as he himself acknowledges. And so back home, after the Second Vatican Council, he continues to practice as a theologian in a suit and tie, because that was the custom in Germany. And he joins a current, a movement, let's call it that. I don't know if you can call it Masonic, but certainly liberal, modernist, which ascribes him as one of the candidates for, I would like to say, the establishment. In the church of a modernist current. He is friends with and associates with figures of the rank of Karl Rahner and Walter Kasper. I hope and I think that these are names that, thanks to yours truly, should not appear to you, if you followed the 𝐔𝐻𝐾𝐫𝐢𝐵 cycle so far, such names, and let's say that are impossible to grasp. I mean, we're talking about titans, especially Karl Rahner of the liberal modernist Affront, who already had in mind at the council to launch an unprecedented attack on Catholic identity, to turn into something like a global syncretist reality. Look at the first globalist is Karl Rahner. That is, if you want to understand Bergoglio, you have to know that behind him, as a way of thinking, as a formulation, he is always a Jesuit. Because Karl Rahner is a Jesuit, as Bergoglio is, there is him, Karl Rahner, who flirts with modernism. Let's say that to some extent at this early stage, Ratzinger appears, we could say, in a conservative position in regards to modernism. It's a little difficult to explain. Let's say he's not an advanced modernist. His thought, it would suffice to read a text that is among Ratzinger's best known, in which traditionalists consider nothing less than a heretical book. The traditionalists, and not just a few traditionalists, they say that Joseph Ratzinger's book, that's very famous, I studied it when I was in college. It's called Introduction to Christianity. It's a very well-known text. Reissued, I don't know in how many times and how many languages, French, German, Italian, Spanish, studied everywhere. And he spends his days, his years this way as a theologian. An avowed modernist, or moderate modernist, in this way of thinking. And so he proceeds down this road. At a certain moment, however, a turning point occurs. The turning point precedes by a little bit the unexpected appointment as Archbishop of none other than Munich. That is, Joseph Ratzinger was immediately pointed out, so ex abrupto, without having accrued a real diplomatic career yet, within, let's say, that hierarchy, immediately he's chosen as Archbishop, Cardinal Archbishop, the Archbishop and then Cardinal of Munich. Munich is, as I think you know, one of the most prestigious sees, not only of the German Catholic Church, but of European Catholicism, and therefore of the whole world. Munich is a very prestigious see. It may not be like Milan, but it's Munich, and Paul VI makes him a cardinal. But it's exactly between this appointment and his assumption as Archbishop of Munich that what we can consider a turning point takes place. Because Joseph Ratzinger at this point changes clothes from the theologian who promised, and maybe that's why he was chosen as Archbishop of Munich, because God writes on crooked lines, who promised in Germany to embody this modernist vanguardism. Soon Joseph Ratzinger unexpectedly abandons, shall we say, the modernist, liberal, modernist trench, to return to a position, at first again moderate, and gradually more and more conservative and even traditionalist. A change of direction, a turning point that only free and courageous men can do. Because a man is made to impose himself in his choices. There is pride, correct? And so it is very difficult that when one who is going in one direction abandons it so suddenly. But he did. We might ask, what made him do that? I read it in one of my books. What prompted Joseph Ratzinger to definitively abandon the modernist trench? Was his encounter with the Swiss theologian, older than him by a few years, by the famous name of Hans Urs von Balthasar? I've told you other times that it was Adrian von Speyer, the mystic who bore the stigmata of Jesus, and whom von Balthasar led, who told him about the Blessed Virgin, about St. Ignatius of Loyola, with whom Van Speyer had a dialogue, we might say, to take care of Ratzinger. And in fact, the first attempts to meet are done by, all things considered, you see what a good story this is, are done, all things considered, by von Balthasar. The two become friends, very close friends. And this new, unexpected friendship between Ratzinger and Balthasar allows them to find a 𝐶𝐶-Leben, as the Germans would say, a milieu, a vital context in which Ratzinger definitively matures his farewell to the modernist positions, especially the extremist ones of Rahner, who by now was on a unchecked course without measure to instead courageously take the side of defense of the Church's bimillennial heritage. The friendship with von Balthasar is a beautiful, intense, holy friendship. Ratzinger recounts in his memoirs that they used to wash dishes after eating together in the mountain house, which he says jokingly, somewhat jokingly. Ratzinger says Balthasar used to talk about very high theological content, even as he passed the sponge over the plates and cutlery. He was never distracted. Together, by heaven's will, they founded a magazine, and I had the joy of having an article of mine published in a Hungarian language magazine, later translated into German, but never in Italian, on von Balthasar. That is, I made my contribution to the magazine Comunio. That was its name, that Balthasar and Ratzinger together founded to serve as a counterpart to Concilium magazine by Rahner. Concilium magazine became immediately famous, but it had no counterpart. It had become the gospel of priests, of theologians, of bishops, and Rahner was constantly writing there, in the sense that no one could write an article unless Rahner, or who for him, blessed this avant-garde modernist type of thinking. And it's during this period here that Ratzinger, as I'm trying to explain tonight in this catechesis, that he becomes aware. Becoming aware is the proper explanation. That the Catholic Church, in light of what happened in the Second Vatican Council, a revisiting of dogmas then, a revisiting of the very identity of Roman Catholicism, that belies 2,000 years of Catholic faith, proposing instead a new one. In the light of von Balthasar's statements, that distance himself from the council, although somehow at Ratzinger's behest he will use some terms, let's say a little softer, and especially in the light of the post-conciliar liturgical reform headed by Bugnini, which cancels the Mass of all time, in order to propose the new one, as we call it today, of Paul VI. Ratzinger becomes aware that we are moving in the direction of an epochal change in the Church. And he questions whether this change is a change simply brought about by the men of the Church, or if it rather does not have, mind you, a further hidden matrix. Well, he understands that we are in the presence of a change that has a preternatorial matrix, and that the fact is that behind all this is the enemy, the devil, to put it in concrete terms. Gradually, he develops a vision in which, first, he realizes that the Catholic Church is under an unprecedented attack. Ratzinger knows well the modernist theology. Therefore, he knows that the goal of modernist theology, which he had somehow galloped, promoted, had somehow propagated, is to ultimately destroy the identity of the Catholic faith. Ratzinger does come then to understand that this current, this modernist synagogue, am I being too difficult to understand? No, tell me if I am, please. This current, this synagogue, this modernist Rahnerian synagogue is targeting the ultimate change of the Catholic Church. And that's where he begins to foresee the first glimpses of this realization we have in the 1970s. when there is a full attunement now with von Balthasar, he becomes aware that yes, there will be this modernism in its most absolute and radical advancement, as we are now seeing with Bergoglio, but that likewise, these are his statements, over the years, there also will be a small Catholic remnant. This is him talking about this for the first time. Don't you find it amazing? I simply find it astonishing. Ratzinger is the first, in, let's say, official terms, who, as Archbishop, then created Cardinal by Paul VI, says in a radio interview that the Catholic Church would soon lose public relevance, that it would no longer be credible, that there would be a profound crisis of priests, and that the church as such, the real church, would be reduced to a small remnant, to a minority, humanly speaking, that would be irrelevant. And this prompted him, it pushed Ratzinger to review with sympathy the traditional Mass.
Lo spinge a Ratzinger a rivedere con simpatia la messa tradizionale.
In Munich, he compared to others. I mean, in France, in Belgium, in Holland, he doesn't persecute those few priests in his diocese who celebrate the Vetus Ordo, the Old Mass. In fact, here and there, reports appear of the cardinal theologian, Ratzinger, Archbishop in German, of course, but then translated. These reports, and included in the opera Omnia, still available today, in which the reports point out that Ratzinger, everything points to the liturgy. That is, he understands that the attack on the Catholic Church comes through liturgical reform, especially the cancellation, and let's say promoted by the Bolognini reform, which wants to take away the traditional Latin Mass forever. This is the first moment of the four. So the first one is awareness. Everything could have remained a little bit like this, but the second moment I titled Confirmation of this awareness. This confirmation, in my opinion, in Joseph Ratzinger, moves within two directions, which are Fatima and the papal election. I'll be clear now. Fatima, the confirmation, Ratzinger receives it by God's will. When, again, unexpectedly, Ratzinger is the man of, let's say, unexpected passages. Because he becomes Archbishop of Munich, unexpectedly. From being a modernist theologian, he becomes a theologian of tradition, unexpectedly. And because, equally unexpectedly, the newly, all things considered, elected Pope John Paul II commands him to leave Munich. This is in the early 1980s. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger leaves Munich, to which region he was most attached because he is Bavarian. He comes to Rome. He comes to Rome as a prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. In a word, and it's no small thing, he becomes what is called a guardian of the faith. In a dramatic moment, because there are these thrusts, as I told you. Avant-garde liberal modernist theology, and with it of the theologies. Here is this beautiful picture to contemplate of Ratzinger with Pope John Paul II, who wanted him in Rome, and of the so-called theologies of praxis, in a word called the theologies of liberation. That is, they are theologies that baptize Marxism and propose it as a allows one to realize that his initial suspicions regarding an attempt to destroy Catholicism are not at all haphazard. ephemeral, but are instead true. That is, in Rome, right away, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger becomes aware that we are in the presence of an unprecedented attack. What does he do then? He, as prefect of the faith, knows from the very beginning the third secret of Fatima. This is very important to say. That is, we are in the presence today of a 95-year-old who, for at least 45 years, and perhaps an unicum, indeed certainly a unicum, knows exactly to the letter the content of the third secret of Fatima. In the year 2000, if you recall, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, who recently passed away, had said that it was the attack of the communists on the church. Instead, he was lying. It was not that. I don't know how the Secretary of State, Cardinal Sodano, had the courage to say these falsehoods. I really don't. I can't explain it. He died recently. How could he say that the third secret was not what it was? It takes courage. It takes a hubris, an ability that's better not to think about. I mean, it denies the evidence. However, then, as you know, we talked about it many times. In 2010, the already Pope Benedict XVI, you remember, he says, no, the third secret is about something else. It's about the apostasy of the faith. Yes, he said it in 2010. But he's known since the 1980s. So Ratzinger's awareness from the 1970s becomes confirmation when he reads, analyzes, studies, and delves into the third secret of Fatima, which involves, as we have said so many times, and unfortunately we still cannot know it officially, just think what ecclesiastical Freemasonry, the Black Panther, the Black Beast, has been able to do. That is, we are in the presence of a third secret that we are living through that affects all of us, but we cannot officially know what it is. This I find scandalous, outrageous. And the whole matrix, the Pandora's box, there is this iron will determined not to want to make this third secret known. I think Ratzinger suffered tremendously with it, but probably even then he was in an isolated position because he probably wanted it to be made known. I have no doubt, because Our Lady wanted to prepare the believing community for what? We know. The Antichrist, the false church, the false pope, the apostasy of the faith. So when Ratzinger becomes aware in the 1970s that there is a Masonic, modernist, Ranerian syncretism that wants to change the very identity of the Catholic Church in the 1980s, in light of the expertise he acquires with the third secret of Fatima, he gets confirmation. That is, he gets confirmation that the third secret of Fatima is exactly what he suspected. Is this all clear to you? The third secret does not investigate the theological aspects, but he is a theologian and friend of von Balthasar who struggled a lifetime to curb, let's say, the modernist affront. And so, as a theologian, he reads the third secret, and the proof of that is that when he is interviewed in the 1990s, Cardinal Ratzinger, interviewed by Vittorio Messori, who I don't need to introduce to you, about the third secret of Fatima, Ratzinger shows that he knows it, obviously, and he says it dates back, or it's referring to Daniel, the prophet, and of course Matthew 24, where it talks about the abomination of desolation, as Sister Lucia had already done, who, when questioned, had also referred back to this very same theme. At that time, Ratzinger was fully aware, that what he had become aware of was already coming. That is, the apostasy of the faith with a false church, which worships Pachamama and clears away forever the bimillennial heritage of the church, and of course a small Catholic remnant who would resist this affront from the Antichrist. I've told you two moments, two directions of the second point of the confirmation. The first one I told you is the third secret of Fatima, where Ratzinger, as I told you, delves into, analyzes as a theologian, and realizes that it is the one that gives light on the time we should have lived. The other episode that confirms the realization of the impending open matter with the Antichrist is the election as Pope. On April 19th, 2005, again, you see what did I say? He's really the Pope of unexpected things. Yes, whatever he had, look, I tell you how I personally feel. He had presided over the funerals of Pope John Paul II. Did you know that? He was the Dean of the College of Cardinals, a friend of Caro Wojtyla. To me, the two are the two witnesses of Apocalypse 11. I think so. And so it was obvious that there was a precipitous attention towards him. But that's the moment when, as we read in the statements of Cardinal Gottfried Daniels, the St. Gallen Mafia was already to seize the opponent to place from the beginning Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who apparently said he didn't feel he was ready at the moment. But it's quite unexpected. However, that in the meantime, the cardinals, and there really was a conclave that was animated by the Holy Spirit, we might say, chose a cardinal in the end, and then elected him Pope, a conservative, a traitorous cardinal. Because, look, Ratzinger, for the likes of Casper and Rahner, to name a few, is a traitorous theologian cardinal. That is, he betrayed the expectations of modernism. But in the meantime, he becomes Pope. And it's an election, in my opinion, unexpected, because the church was already attacked by what we call the St. Gallen Mafia. Cardinal Gottfried Daniels says it. I'm not making this stuff up. It was a resounding defeat for the Liberal Progressive Party, but also of the Masonic Party, which did not expect that at that conclave, which lasted very little, in April 2005, a humble worker in the vineyard of the Lord would appear from the loggia of St. Peter. Now, I have to tell you, I've said this before, but this catechesis tonight, let's hope it gets to him, to the Pope. Oh, if it gets to him, he'll make me a cardinal, I'm sure, because Pope Benedict will be able to say, this priest said everything really as it happened. I have no doubt. With joy, I make him a cardinal. So I was saying something, I think. Do you remember how Ratzinger appeared? Do you remember him? He looked like a clueless man. Of course, even Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, they had at first, when they first appeared as popes, a form of obvious fear. But Ratzinger looks like an altar boy. He looks like someone planted there who's thinking, but what's going on here? Did you see how he greets people? It makes the heart melt. Look at him. It rips the heart out to see him greeting that way. What is it, a rugby final? Totally out of place at that moment. But why did he react in this way? Because he didn't expect to become Pope. Certainly that. But I'll tell you more this evening. Because, in my opinion, he knew, trembling, because he must have been trembling, you know, that when a Pope is elected, then he is given a space of time to mope, to weep. There is a chapel near the Sistine Chapel called the Chapel of Tears, where the newly elected Pope goes to be alone. And there it is called the Chapel of Tears, because evidently the newly elected Pope certainly is not exactly happy with the cross that the Eternal Father puts on his shoulders. But there's no one who would have been more afraid than Pope Benedict XVI himself, because he knew the third secret of Fatima. He knew that this election forced him, in spite of himself, to take on the very heavy cross of, sooner or later, becoming the pontiff of the little remnant he had spoken of in the 1970s. He never imagined that he himself would have to be, in first person, that is, concerned. It's like when I tell you about the great prelate, and then it comes out that maybe, I said this for the enemies, to put salt in their wounds. they choose me as the great prelate. It's obvious that I would faint, because no one, like me, knows, having studied the matter. It seems to me that you can agree with me in this, in saying that, along with other things. I was the first in this as well, to speak to you and to prepare you for the coming, the identity, and the mission of the great prelate. So, I know that poor man, he faces incredible challenges. Are you understanding me? I, more than you know. So if I became one, I would have had an awareness, let's say, of the role. Maybe I would run away if it were to happen. Here is Benedict XVI, if he could have, he would have run away, because he has an awareness that what he's going to embrace at the head of the Catholic Church is actually the time of the great apostasy of the faith and the arrival of the Antichrist. Can we find somewhere? Oh my, I just watched the video with Benedict XVI, and then I watched him again, and there was that other one there, a punch in the gut. Where was I? Can we get some clues about this? That is, that Benedict XVI had awareness? That he went from awareness to confirmation? I'd say yes. We have one. I read about it in my book, Mary and the Antichrist, for a theological reading of the final clash, which is the homily the Pope gave at the Mass called the Mass of Enthronement on April 24th, 2005. I don't know if you know what the Mass of Enthronement is. The Mass of Enthronement is the one in which the Pope-elect celebrates for the first time as Pope and receives from the Cardinal, Dean, the fisherman's ring, and the Pope's pallium. In short, the symbols of the role of Pope. And yet, that Mass there is important because in that Mass the Pope gives a program of his own pontificate. If you go and read the homily of Pope Benedict XVI's Enthronement Mass, you read the program that he's going to carry out. However, unexpectedly, he is the Pope of unexpected things, as we know, as we've said. Unexpectedly, he leaves modernist theology. Unexpectedly, he becomes Archbishop of Munich and Cardinal. Unexpectedly, he's called to Rome as Prefect of the Faith. Unexpectedly, he becomes the Pope. The last point of the unexpected things is, unexpectedly, he will resign. So, do we have a clue that he had this awareness, that he was called to embody the Pope of Fatima? Do we have this confirmation? Where is this? In the Enthronement Mass, because as he is presenting the program of his pontificate, unexpectedly, Benedict XVI says, "Pray for me so that I will not flee before the wolves." Well, what kind of statement is that? Does the statement seem normal? So ex abrupto, out of nowhere. That is, the sentence is not normal. It is not a sentence that Benedict XVI utters, simply the famous amphibologies. He's like that. He uses these. He is like Jesus, Benedict XVI. On this, the credit is all of Andrea Cionci's. Benedict XVI states something that hides a deeper one. He has always been like that. When he says, "Pray for me that I may not flee before the wolves," what he really means is, in an amphibological way, is, "Dear Catholics, I know that I will not be able to rule here, the Vatican. The Vatican is the lair of Satanist Freemasonry. Do you agree? Because otherwise it would not make sense." He could have simply said, "Pray for me," and that's it. There's no need to utter such a somber, seemingly out-of-place funereal phrase. Do you understand this? "Pray that I may not flee before the wolves" means, look, I've been saying this since the 1970s. I had the suspicion because as a theologian I came to it with my mind. I knew the third secret of Fatima. I said to Pope John Paul II, you know that when Wojtyla got ill, Ratzinger, cunningly, used to say to John Paul II, "Your Holiness, now that my role is done, I'm going to retire to Bavaria." Because he was getting nervous. They'd say in my neck of the woods, he was afraid. he was disconcerted. He was afraid that by staying there, that he would also find himself mixed up in this business of ultimately fighting with the Antichrist. Because the third secret of Fatima, which unfortunately we cannot know yet, and this is an unprecedented responsibility of the Vatican, and the Vatican is liquefying and is no longer the heart of the Catholic Church, and it will no longer be so with the great prelate because he has disregarded the command of heaven. I'm sure that he wanted to leave. However, he was forced to accept the office of Pope. And then he says, look, dear Catholics, it will not go well here. And if he said that in that sentence where he says, pray for me so that I don't flee before the wolves, it's as if he said, in a little way, a universal flood is coming because this wind anticipates the storm. And I think that he is saying, pray for me, so that I don't flee before the wolves. It's a way of saying, watch. That in the Vatican, there is Freemasonry. That here we are about to move forward to the third secret of Fatima and its fulfillment. And therefore, I don't know how it will end. I don't know how it will end. That's the second point. Well, let's go to the third point. And the first one is the realization. We said the second one is the confirmation with the knowledge of the third secret of Fatima and the election as Pope. Third point, as I was telling you, is the implementation of the program. So Benedict XVI from 2005 to 2013 is the Pope of the Holy Roman Church. But he's also a serious man, 𝐕𝐢𝐽, and he realizes that with the 𝐕𝐢𝐿𝐼𝐴 scandal, do you remember that? The purloining of the personal papers on the personal desk, the butler that was serving him, and his personal papers were being snatched from 𝐕𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐴. And then again, especially with the cardinals isolating him more and more, little by little, Benedict XVI realizes that the time has come to fulfill the project. The project that he has known since the 1970s, confirmed by the third secret, which is about the fact that the church would become a minority. A little clandestine and kind of humble remnant. He understands little by little, more and more, that he is the Pope of this fulfillment. Is this all clear? And he begins to engineer the maneuver, let's call it that, to start the season of the third secret of Fatima. And what are his steps? We know them very well. We know them. We just have to reformulate them succinctly. Benedict XVI, on February 11, 2013, he announces his resignation, but he does it in a very unusual and unexpected way. An unexpected way. You see how many times we said unexpected? He unexpectedly announces his resignation, unexpectedly for you, not for me. If you want me to tell you about it, because I like this catechizis tonight. Too bad we have to close a little bit early because it's about to rain and I wouldn't want to have a storm coming down on us. As I was saying, I dreamed of him in the month of December, Joseph Ratzinger. I dreamt of Pope Benedict in the month of December. There are witnesses who know that in the year 2012, he then in February would resign. I dreamt of him. To make a long story short, ushering me into the papal sacristy to talk to me, let's say face to face, but I really talked to him. It's as if I lived it. Pope Benedict, at one point, would drop the crozier that came thudding to the ground, procuring a huge noise. And he would say these exact words to me, I can no longer govern. I told it to the faithful. Maybe there's someone here present, surely Caterina will remember it, among those present, and I wondered what that dream meant back then. Then in February, on February 11th, a month and a half after that dream, he announced his resignation. But in a strategic way, because that resignation contradicted the canon law 332, paragraph 2, which states that the Pope resigns only if there's free, and therefore he hands over the munus, and therefore he makes a text that is formally perfect. Benedict XVI, unless he has lost his mind and changed in character, but to this question, which is the decisive one, the enemies don't answer, as you see. They only know how to hurl strides. Because first, Benedict XVI has not been free. And we have seen this, and we know it. Second, he didn't deliver the munus. The canon law is very clear. It says, we were talking about it with the priests these days, the other priests all left, only Father Pavel is still here. And he says, the canon law says, sui munere renunciat. Sui munere, that is the word munus. Now the codex is not like an advertising program, it's precise, it's perfect. So it means that he had to deliver the munus, the word munus had to appear. Have no use of the funny and gross attempts of some canonists to explain that munus is equal to ministerium. No, because it doesn't say ministerium, it says munus. And Benedict XVI didn't deliver the munus. And finally, the most glaring thing, in my opinion, the grammatical errors for a refined Latinist like Ratzinger that he does, that he exchanges a nominative for an accusative and so on. Then it's clear that he had planned this, the third point. Therefore, is the implementation of the plan. What did this plan involve? In a nutshell, simply put, the plan involved this. Freemasons and Satanists, I give you the throne. Because there are still those who write until this morning, when I finish this morning's catechesis, why doesn't Benedict XVI speak clearly? They are really stubborn. But he couldn't have spoken any clearer than that. How else was he supposed to speak? He handed over the throne to you. Take it. Since for years I could no longer rule here anyway, I'd become a symbolic figure. Oh yes, because he was being handed cardinal and bishop appointments that he didn't even know who they were, and those that he had chosen himself were not granted to him. I mean, really, Benedict XVI, as early as 2010, when he could not, for example, proclaim the holy curator of Ars, the patron saint of all priests, and other resounding denials. At least since 2010, Benedict XVI gradually, more and more, progressively could no longer govern the church. It was being ruled by the hidden Freemasons, the Mafia St. Gallen, and so he realized that he had to implement the plan that he had known since the 1970s. That is, he says, I hand over to you the throne. In the meantime, I will take the munus and start. This is the decisive passage. The reason of Fatima, that of a minority catacombic church, of the little remnant that he had talked about in the 1970s, to which he had to surrender in becoming aware that he was the Pope of this fulfillment. Have I explained myself? I find it crystal clear the argument makes no bones about it. This is a historic speech tonight. Please pass it on. Talk to friends about it. Tell these things. Reason them out. Put them here. Put them there calmly. Drug them if necessary. But so that at least it gets into their heads. Do an exorcism. Because these are speeches, it seems to me. I don't know why they attack me like this and offend and slander again. It's because they don't have arguments. Because as you see, it's all a coherent speech. I'm not making anything up. It's all proven. It's all written and it's all proven. He, Benedict XVI, third point, understood that he had to implement this design. He would have never imagined in the 1970s when he figured it out. How is it that he figured it out? I told you, because he was a wise theologian. But he probably also had light from God, a man of great prayer, that is Ratzinger. He sensed this. He never imagined that he should be the Pope who would have to implement this design at some point, that he would have to give up. He chose February 11th, the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. Why did he choose February 11th? To announce the fake resignation. That is Our Lady of Lourdes. I'll tell you why. It is a suspicion. Here I have no proof, so much so that I wanted to write about it in my book, but then I said, if it is not so, then I pass as a braggart, then I don't write it. However, I have to tell you, you have to catch the best of me when I preach, better than when I write. When I preach, I always let myself go. I have a suspicion, and I'll tell you. We talk so much about the third secret of Fatima, rightly the matrix of everything we are saying tonight. That is, today we are the catacombic minority church. In a little while, when they reduce the other priests to the lay state as well, we will finish the Mass live on Radio Domina. We will see each other in homes and through regional contacts. We'll have phone numbers in homes. So everyone, let's in who they want and take responsibility, because in a while we are going to be persecuted. It's unbelievable. We are being persecuted like the priests at the time of the communist regime or the French Revolution. This is unbelievable. We have to take off the cassock. We have to celebrate secretly, and this because of one who pretends to be the Pope. Good thing he's not. This is the third secret, actually. However, I don't know. I don't know if you know that Our Lady delivered a secret to Saint Benedetto XVI. Few people know that. In Lourdes, Our Lady gave a secret. Ah, yes. Priests, theologians, bishops, cardinals tried to get out of the Bernadette's lips what this secret was. She put it in writing, but she never spoke about it. I have a suspicion. Ratzinger, as a prefect of the faith, he had access to the secret archives, and I believe that studying and restudying the third secret of Fatima, they must have suggested to him, the team that was with him, that there was a secret of Lourdes, that even know of less than the secret of Fatima. Do you want to bet that it's precisely in Lourdes, where Bergoglio didn't set foot, by the way, because the Masons can't hold on for long inside the grotto? Precisely in Lourdes, that Our Lady said something more that Ratzinger was aware of, and that, therefore, that is why he precisely chose February 11th. All right. They say it was the day when there was a consistory. Yes, but Ratzinger, was free to be able to say it at any other time. He chose that. He chose that. It is by no chance. On February 11th, Benedict XVI, and on February 28th, he leaves. As you know, by helicopter, he leaves Rome and goes to Castel Gandolfo. He had said he would disappear from the scene. Do you remember that? He had said in the last Angelus, I will be like Moses on Mount Sinai. I will pray. But what will I pray for? He did not take off his robes. He stayed in Rome. He is the long shadow, the specter that puts fear into the Bergoglian party. He has played his cards. He has implemented Mary's plan in the face of Satan's counterplan to take the throne of St. Peter. As Leo XIII had seen, Benedict XVI was the champion that Mary chose to play the cards of Mary's own plan. He had made it sound like he was going to leave. It sounded like a rout. The Freemasons must have toasted the tune of champagne. They got it that way, to put it mildly, in the way to be, shall we say, elegant. He's been a pain in the neck until now. Now that we don't know anything about him, except now and then, some very brief news, Benedict XVI, however, is still there. He is the katekon, as we have said in other installments. That is, Benedict XVI, prevents the Antichrist from manifesting himself. He's there. He didn't leave Rome. He agreed to relegate himself to the impeded see, making everyone realize that there was an anomaly. Otherwise, solvable, because two popes cannot exist. It was the implementation of a plan, of a program played with attention, even to the commas. I told you about the resignation thing, which is a workhorse for all of us. And the fourth point is the epilogue. Benedict XVI, he knew that he was at the time of the fulfillment, and in this some people are right, but beware. Benedict XVI is at the same time the fulfillment, but also the forerunner. This was the last point in 4 minutes that I want to deal with, because it is already 10:15, the fulfillment and the forerunner. What do I want to say? It is the fulfillment. And in this, someone is right in saying that when they write and say and affirm that Benedict XVI is implementing the third secret of Fatima in silence, in prayer, and all this is true. It is before our eyes, but it is not complete as an affirmation, because if with him dying the church would end, what would we then as a small remnant be doing? What would our future be? We are the heirs of the Pope's sacrifice. We are the fruit of his blood, of his sacrifice. Because Benedict XVI knows the prophecies, and he knows. And he also talked about it with the journalist Peter Sewald, who I mentioned to you at the beginning, that the great prelate will come. That the fourth point is the epilogue. That is, Benedict XVI has decided not to die until he has confirmation that the little remnant is ready to receive the baton. Do you find that wonderful? I always bring an image that moves me. Moses with Joshua. Moses does not enter the promised land. After having been through all sorts of things, like Benedict XVI, Moses knows that he cannot enter. And then he tells Joshua, the commander, that he will be the one, by God's will, through Moses, to introduce the Hebrews into the promised land. Of course, the Hebrews are then all bound to Moses, but it's Joshua who will lead them. Here Moses is Benedict XVI, Joshua, the great prelate. You cannot understand Joshua without Moses, in the same way that you will not be able to understand the great prelate at all without Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI is the light of the prelate. The great prelate, so to say, is not an alternative or even a parallel figure to Benedict XVI. The great prelate will be a completely consequential figure to Benedict XVI. That is why he's not dying. 95 years old, he is there, because the little remnant is becoming a reality. It's taking shape more and more every day. If he had died 3 years ago, what were we then at that time compared to today? But now we see that things are maturing. There are 7 priests who publicly, I've been giving them attention these days. As you can understand, I fear that in the face of the retaliation that has not been long in coming, some of them might falter, but I see them serene, motivated. You can see that there is really finally a descent into the field, whatever it takes. It was like this 3 years ago. Domina will now go around the world. In fact, I'd like to know if the contact person from Australia could get in touch and get in touch with our office, either from Melbourne, where there are small cells, but also, it doesn't matter how small they are. The important thing is, even in Argentina they were small, in Paraguay there were no cells, in Uruguay the same, in Colombia. And so, Dominutella, in the meantime, goes around and woe to those who contract this bond with the Eternal Father, judging my conscience and writing that I do all this to make money and to travel around. Because if it was true, they got it right. Because if it's not true, though, too bad for them. You hear me? Anyhow, meanwhile, Dominutella, now that there are priests who get a little busier, as many as 3, Don Enrico, Don Natale, Friar Celestino, they're Italian. I'm going to intensify today with your help, because that's what angers the Freemasonry, that you're helping me financially. This help that you are giving me by saying, Father, take the ticket and go ahead where Our Lady sends you, doesn't make them sleep at night. You understand me? Because here they pretend that the monetary economic aspect is irrelevant. It is decisive, because it is allowing us to go on. We priests can live without the salary, and this to them makes them very angry. It is a victory of the Holy Virgin, the Dominutella, with this team that he chooses, because no one is dumb enough to leave alone, can leave to go to Latin America. Now they want me also in Africa, around Europe, around Italy, to motivate the little remnant, with the economic help of all of you. It's something that gnaws at the Freemasons. Trust me, trust me. And Benedict XVI is there. Don't you find that wonderful? When he said, I'm going up on the mount like Moses, he meant it. And I've concluded. All this I've announced to you tonight. Praise be Jesus Christ, and onward with Mary.
May it be an evening star shines down upon you. May it be when darkness falls, your heart will be true. You walk a lonely road. Oh, how far you are from home. No
𝐷𝐚𝐝𝐲 𝐃𝐨𝐦𝐢𝐧𝐚